Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. I am going to give you an update on my Dutch style aquascape and my nature aquarium aquascape, and just give you a brief rundown of the lessons that I've learnt recently. And it's really useful actually to compare the two, because it really gives you a kind of reference point about why each style is different and why you might prefer one style over the other. They're both Awase Escape-Line 60s, really beautiful aquarium systems, cabinet, tank, Biomaster filtration, although this has the bio style hang on the back filter with a inline CO2 diffuser and heater, which I've kind of retrofitted. There is a separate video on that. Both tanks with twin star lighting. This has the lower powered E version and this is the latest S version. Both great lights, and thanks to Twin Star for supplying them. Also, thanks to Tropica and Awase for their continued support of my YouTube channel. Very grateful. Let's take a look at the Nature Aquarium style scape first. This has been running for probably around 6 months now. Originally scaped as a home-based aquascaping workshop. We had 10 guests here in the George Farmer Studios home, and there will be another workshop in the new year, so keep your eyes peeled for announcements of that. And thanks to everyone that's registered their interest so far. You can still register interest now by using the contact button on my website. So, classic Nature Aquarium style. Many of you have seen this style. Heavy use of rocks and wood. Lots of attaching plants there. We've got the beautiful trident fern, some Anubias petite, some Bucophilandra, Sordidula blue. My favourite crypts at the moment, there's a Cryptocorini spiralis red in the background with some slight BBA going on, but it's slowly dying back on its own accord, which I'm happy to see. And then another plant which I really enjoy using, although it is a very fast grower, is the Sagittaria subulata. I think this is a really beautiful texture, a very vertical texture of course, a grassy feel, and I think it complements the crypt spiralis in the background there really well. Another crypt we've got is the Cryptocorini nurii, also known as Rose Maiden from Tropica. This is a 1-2 grow. All plants of course supplied by Tropica Aquarium Plants. Do have a little bit of Staragini in here, which I have transported from the Dutch scape, just to add a little bit more of an interesting texture. And there is a tiny little bit of Hygrophila polysperma, just to add a little bit more interest as well. We do have a few more crypts in species in here. We've got the Parva, which is the smallest crypt, and then we have some Willisii as well. But yeah, just a really classic Nature Aquarium style, open sand foreground. I really like the contrast of the dark wood and the pale sand. We've got Tropica soil in the back there. It's been an aquascape of ups and downs really. I've suffered from quite a few algae issues over the months, but mainly the black beard or blackbrush algae, but that has been dying back, like I say, on its own accord with frequent maintenance and just keeping an eye on things. Not a big fan of using chemicals unless I really have to. Maintenance wise, I will do a quick maintenance session on these today, just a 50% water change, clean the glass, clean the pre-filter. Daily maintenance is liquid fertilisers, a tiny little pinch of flake in there. There are some platy fry, but the biggest population is actually the cherry shrimp, breeding like crazy in here, which is really good to see. And I'm putting quite a few now in here because we are experiencing some quite bad algae issues at the moment, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's hard to sort of choose a favourite over Nature Aquarium versus Dutch. I think I'll always have Nature Aquarium style close to my heart. It's what really inspired me to become an aquascaper when I first discovered Takashi Amano's work. In fact, his first kind of well-known book, Nature Aquarium World Book 1, which I think was released in the early 90s. It is unavailable now. I don't think it's being printed anymore, and it can fetch up to £100 on the second-hand market. But I did manage to buy a second-hand copy off Amazon for £25. So I've got 2 copies, just because I love that book so much. And I owe a lot to Takashi Amano. He's the guy that really laid the foundation for modern aquascaping, in my opinion. And now we have tens of thousands, if not more, aquascaping hobbyists, which have been hugely inspired by that Nature Aquarium principle, which is basically using inspiration from outside, landscapes or seascapes, forests, etc., and then transporting that kind of essence of nature into the aquarium. And that's what we've got here, classic use of hardscape materials. I tend to prefer the lower maintenance plants, but you can use stem plants, of course, and advanced plants, difficult plants if you want to. But this style you can replicate in any kind of aquarium system, whether it's like the super low-tech tanks with garden soil and zero water changes, if that's your bag, all the way up to the highest end, with pH controllers, CO2 inline, super complex substrates, powerful LED lighting, and everything in between. The style is the style. It doesn't really matter how you achieve that style. And I think that's an important lesson, actually. There's no right or wrong methodology to keeping aquarium plants, as long as it makes you happy and you're not harming any of the inhabitants even. So yeah, nature aquarium style, massive fan, always will be, but also a big fan of learning new things. And let's move on to the Dutch scape. This Dutch aquascape now has been set up for around 8 weeks, and there is a dedicated playlist for the whole journey, from planning the scape to implementing it and going through some of the progress and some of the issues. And speaking of issues, I do have quite considerable algae in here. It's like a diatoms algae, but it's quite kind of stubborn. Most diatoms is relatively easy to rub off. I'm not sure what's caused it. I don't want to blame anyone. I take full responsibility. But during my week away in Denmark, I did ask my stepson to feed the fish, and my wife also fed the fish. So they've had at least twice as much food as necessary. And I do think my wife has accidentally overfed on top of that, because she's used to feeding the slicked tank, which they have a lot of food in there. And there's only 3 juvenile platies in here, and I wonder how much food was being put in there. When I did I noticed actually granules of food in here when I returned. So I did a huge maintenance session, water changing and siphoning out all the uneaten food. And there was so much, I was actually a little bit traumatic, because I was just thinking, this is a disaster. It's just like someone's poured in half a pot of food. Anyway, I think that's caused a little bit of an ammonia spike and probably triggered the algae. The fish and the shrimp are all fine. I haven't seen any suffering animals in here, which is a relief. There's no melting plants, just algae, which I'm pretty sure is just a temporary issue. I'm sure as the plants carry on growing, by the nature of them growing, hopefully they'll be able to fight off that algae. And I'll do another maintenance session on here today, and I will trim off the worst affected leaves and just try to remove as much algae as I can manually with my fingers. In terms of the actual aquascape, I'm quite happy with the development. It is a little bit unorthodox for a Dutch style aquascape. We do have 1, 2, 3, 4 species of crypts in here, and maybe not a classic kind of plant choice, but I like it. I'm hopeful that it will kind of come back to its peak condition with the plant health. But this is one of the things we go through as an aquascaper. You do come up with challenges, and I think those challenges serve a purpose. By overcoming those challenges, we learn, we build resilience, it builds our kind of knowledge foundation, so we can use that knowledge to help prevent further issues in the future. And the great thing about YouTube and other social media and forums, etc., is that we can share our knowledge and for the betterment of the community, so other people might not make those mistakes. But it's really interesting. When I first started the hobby, if I got any algae or any issues, I'd almost catastrophize and do a complete strip down and start fresh, and had this kind of sense of perfectionism, which isn't helpful really in a hobby, especially with aquascaping, where it's a living, evolving, organic kind of organism as a whole, not just the individual species, the fish, the plants, the bacteria, the shrimps, etc. The whole thing is like a giant kind of organism all working as one. a little bit like the planet Earth, but on a smaller scale. So you're always going to have challenges and potential issues, and us as the creator and the maintainer, it's our responsibility, to hopefully remedy those issues and create something beautiful, something you can be proud of, and something that you can really enjoy, not just the consumption of looking at it and relaxing with it, but enjoy the maintenance side of it as well. Even if it's cleaning algae, just do it mindfully, pay full attention to what you're doing. While you're doing that, you're not worried about anything else. I think it's a really therapeutic hobby from that perspective. In terms of the learning I've had from the style of aquascaping, it's just obviously very contrasting with the nature aquarium. Very formal, very kind of rules driven, and that actually put me off to start with, but now I find that quite attractive. I find having a kind of almost a strict rule set, there's less, it's more rewarding in a way, because if you are obeying those rules and succeeding by doing that, you kind of in a way get a sense of achievement that's a little bit different from like kind of a more free-flowing organic style like the nature aquarium, where there's much more room for error. You can rely on the hardscape, you can rely on the deliberate overgrowth of the plants kind of merging into one another to create natural textures, and this is very rewarding in its own way, but it's just a different style and a different kind of reward, if you like. So I think on a kind of more detailed level, I find it fascinating how I've never really paid much attention to plants, how they affect each other from just a purely aesthetic perspective. So we've obviously got no hardscape in here, and every plant has to serve a purpose on its own, and you have the contrasting colours, the contrasting textures, the contrasting heights, leaf shapes, sizes, and they all have an influence on the whole picture. And they're the same thing with the nature aquarium, but it's a bit more disguised and a bit more kind of, I wouldn't say blurred, but yeah, like the lines are blurred literally and metaphorically as well. Whereas with the Dutch style, it is very distinct, and just by removing one or two leaves here and there, you can really change the whole kind of vibe of the layout. So it's really interesting, and you can really go quite kind of really strict. And for instance, the Marsilea here is actually starting to grow against the glass. So what I'm going to do is trim away the sort of the front centimetre or so, and have that as a distinct kind of boundary. Because one of the rules with Dutch style is each species needs to kind of be distinct from the other, rather than letting them all overgrow into one another, which again is contrasting with the nature aquarium style. So yeah, I've learnt a lot about the aesthetics and how it impacts, each species can impact each other, and the aquascape as a whole. Learnt about algae and hopefully how we're going to deal with that.